Welcome to Carly Noble Art Painting Tutorial. Today we're going to be painting an elephant based on a reference photo that I took in Botswana. You're just going to need a couple supplies, a piece of watercolor paper, 9 by 12 if you have it. If you don't, the grid won't make sense for sketching it out, but you could always just intuitively go by your own proportions of what you think makes sense. A simple watercolor set just with your primaries. We don't need anything super extensive. You can always kind of make your own colors, and I'll be referencing some of that. 2 watercolor brushes, one thicker, one thinner, pencil, good eraser, 4 graphite, and a ruler. I'm going to be using millimeters, so it'd be nice if your ruler has millimeters. If not, you can always just do a conversion on your own of inches to millimeters. Here is the elephant we're going to be drawing. If you'd like to hold on to the reference, just screenshot this and you can use it, or you could just follow along with what I'm doing. The photo won't be in the frame, but you can just do what I'm doing. Or you can keep bouncing back to this image if you want a little bit of a reference to hold on to in your brain, because your painting could look completely different than mine. That's fine too. So to start us out, we're going to draw a grid, and this is going to help us with our proportions. 30 millimeters by 30 millimeters is the size of each box. So we're going to draw a nice layout, start measuring with our ruler at 30 millimeters, 60, 120, etc., till we fill up our whole page. And then we're going to draw lines to connect them and do the same thing the other orientation. So now we're going to connect these to make our grid and make our lines. But when you do this, you want to use a really light pressure. I'm using a light colored pencil for my sketch. So when I think it's 2C, there's different levels of graphite, but even if you have a darker one, it's fine. Just go very light on the pressure because we're going to be erasing this later after we're done sketching, and you don't want to have these marks still lined on your paper. So once we finish out our grid, 30 millimeters by 30 millimeters for every single box, we filled our page. Now we're going to do some markers. So on the vertical, I'm going to number it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and that tiny one in the top left corner is an 8. And then on horizontal, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And this is going to keep track of what box we're working in when we're doing the layout for the elephant. So now we're going to start drawing the top of the head, starting in E8 and going over into F8 as well. The dome of the head kind of goes between the two, and the ears come out on either side of that. So we're going to drop it just down into F7. That's where the forehead will go. So we're going to start the ear coming out. E8, going into D8. About midway starts to bend. And you just kind of nick the corner of C8 down to C7. Now we're in the corner of C6. I just want a little bit, it's about a quarter way through B and C lines. And that's when you bend it back in. And so that's the little wrinkles of the ear. So C6 is going to go into D6, dropping down right there into the corner of 5, E5, stay at the top of it, about a quarter way down, D5, That's where it's going to connect. E5. Halfway through E5 is where the end of the ear is. So we'll pull that up. So now we're going to do the other ear, which is starting at F8. Comes out. This lays flat for the most part, doesn't go up too much, but it's going to dip down. G, G8, H8, in that corner there. Now, I went a little too low quickly, so I'm using an eraser, not a pink one that you have on the back of a pencil. You want an artist's eraser, they don't leave residue. And just clean it up. So now we're dropping back down into 7. I'm just kind of marking about halfway through G and H. That's where I want to connect it. And I'm going to dip it down. We're in 6 now. 6H into 6G. Next about halfway. I clear halfway to 5. G. We're just kind of barely grazing that top corner of 5. F. And that's where the trunk is going to begin. So the trunk is in F5. And it's going to swoop down. So going from F5, we're going to go into G6 and create a little ledge here, and that's going to be for the tusks. They're not very big, so it's just going to be kind of a little like bean shape, staying within the boundaries of the 6 box, the G6 box. And it's about halfway it's right in the middle of it. I want it too high. I want it a little lower, closer to the edge of the ear. So now we're going to start the rest of the trunk going into box E5. In that top corner, the other side of the trunk. Little ledge where tusk is going to be, and then you just pull it down. You're going to be staying just right there along the edge. Into F, you're just going to pull it all the way down. So from F4 right into F3 is where we're going to hook it over. The trunk is curled. Moving back down. And pulling. It's going to take up that whole box width for the most part. You don't want it too narrow. It's going to narrow where it curls. So with E5, we're going to go up into E6, and we're going to just start the other tusk. I'm going to end up having to fix this, so it's not exactly where I want it to be. But just starting a layout, we're going to have a little, it's like a bean shaped tusk. It's at a different angle, so we're not getting like a profile of it, and it is a smaller tusk anyway, and it kind of protrudes out, so it's almost like a cheek. So we're going to highlight where it comes out, and that's going to help us get the shape of the head. So after I finish the tusk, I'm going to start laying this out. The E6 around the middle part of it, or about a third way from the left, and then pulling it up to 7. You're going to be at the far edge of E, going into D, but not quite crossing over into D, but you're just kind of hovering as you're going into 7. And then you swoop in, not too much, maybe a quarter way through. And going over between F and G, you're just going to create a little ledge for the eye, forehead. But the dome of the top of the head doesn't necessarily staying there, it's just the marker for it. About halfway down in 7, between 7 and going into 6, kind of goes in. That's going to be where the eye is. Halfway between in 7. And the eye shape is small, it's kind of like a little diamond. And they are tucked back, so I'm going to create a little eyelid almost with the shadows later, connecting that to the tusk. Because even though it is a head-on shot, the eyes are set back into the side. So it's not going to come out straight ahead, it's going to be at an angle. I'm going to draw, I want the eyes to be somewhat in line, but the head is slightly tilted, so you want a little bit of an angle, maybe like 10 degrees down. Also doing that diamond shape. And we're in E7, a little lower than halfway through, doing the diamond shape, and we're also going to do a little fold right there to help us with the dimensions because it is set back and we need to shade that properly so it doesn't look flat. Right above the eye, I'm going to do a little curve to emphasize the forehead and pull down the top of the skull a little bit. Now I can kind of see that the tusk is not exactly where I want it, so I'm going to have to fix that. Now that that's finished, we're going to lay out the body. And this is going to be starting at the bottom of the ear. That's D5, right in the center of it. I'm going to pull down, that's the leg. D5. I'm going to kind of cut the corner of D4 into E4. Now we're going to be kind of close to the trunk. Just keep pulling that down at a slight angle. So now we're in E2, going into E1. We're going to finish that foot later. We'll start mapping out the rest of the body. We have H6. Just at the edge, almost G, and that's where the belly comes out. So it kind of is like a rounded shape going into H5, kind of curves in. Too much, but now we're going to be going down into G. That's G4. That's where the belly is. Once we clear the bottom of that, we can kind of connect it and round it from that curve of the trunk, the marker for where the belly is going to curve. do that one a little lighter because we're going to go back and a little bit that's going to be erased for the leg. So one of the legs is going to be coming out from G4. We're going to just pull it down right at that edge before the trunk starts. It's going to be the corner of the leg, kind of running parallel down to F1. I kind of round that, not hit the bottom, into G1, and then connecting the F1, 2, 3, and the G1, 2, 3. So then at G5, right below that tusk at the ear, we're going to do the front leg. Pulls down, running parallel to the trunk. That's just going to clear where the belly is. Pulling it forward. So it's going to be an F3, and then going down, heading towards E. I'm just going to stay on that corner, that edge. Now going from E1, I kind of connect these. Go parallel to it. It's going to kind of meet up where the trunk is. I went a little too in there, so I'm going to need to widen that out. And it peaks a little bit behind the trunk. After I fix that, there's just a little edge behind the trunk. And then we can kind of round that bottom E and F1. Now we have our legs that are visible to us all drawn, and we can start going in with some detail. So now I'm going to go in and just kind of add a little bit of lines to distinguish different creases and edges, and that'll help me with my shadows and my highlights later. So now at this point I'm just adding a little bit of edges and bringing some attention to the legs so I can better highlight and do shadows and kind of know where things start and end. And then we're going to erase the grid behind. I didn't film this, but just very simply erase the grid behind, the numbers, the letters, and try to be careful not to erase too much of your actual drawing of the elephant, and try to keep that intact as best as you can. Okay, so the grid is gone. I did smudge the nose, but the paint that we're going to do is going to cover that up, so it'll be fine, but I was annoyed. I got most of the grid out, and then after I'm done painting, I'll go back and I'll erase any other pencil smudges that I might still have left over. So what we're going to do to start is we're going to do the trunk, and they have these big wrinkles. Pulling that edge and get a more distinct visual of where things are going. There's a little shadow there. And I'm going to kind of pull. You want it kind of rounded. You don't want a straight line. You want it a little bit of a dome shape. And these creases get more and more dense as you go down. So they should be pretty sparse at the top of the trunk. And then we're going to get a little close together right here. And it gets very close. These little tight wrinkles right where the trunk is bent. And you just kind of still want it not a straight line. You want it arched a little bit. So now we're going to go in and kind of mark where the shadows are and where the highlights are. So this whole right side is highlighted. So these little circles I'm drawing is going to be where we're highlighted, and then if I do a little shading, that's where it's going to be shaded a little darker. So this is just kind of a loose marker for me to remember to avoid heavy paint in those light areas. I can go a little bit darker where I'm noting, okay, you can go dark. So right there is a highlight. Right there in the arm is a highlight. The whole corner of the body is very light, so we'll probably put 0 to no paint. This corner of the ear, the sunlight is coming from the right side, so most of the right part of the body and the face are going to be highlighted, and these little shadows will pop through. There's a highlight at the trunk, highlight right there, but the other side of the trunk is going to be kind of dark. And this whole other left ear is dark for the most part, but there's slight variations in color. So I'm going to obviously remember that and be looking at the photo, but that's just like a little reminder to go lighter right there in the middle of the ear and on that edge. This back leg and this side of the leg are all pretty dark. And there's like a dimple right where their ear and their head meet. For all elephants, that is always going to be indented and a little darker. So on both sides, that's going to be the case. So now I'm just doing a couple little lines, just they're going to be there, so I just want to cover it now. Add a little bit of grass, and this will kind of help me with shading and not going too heavy with the feet, because I'm going to have some grass poking through, and the horizon is right mid-body. I'm just kind of carrying that through behind. I don't know if I'm going to do a background yet, but it's good to know where the horizon is just when you're laying it out, if the colors are spilling over. So now I'm going to start painting. I'm just going to use 2 different brushes, one watercolor, a big brush, and one small brush. So I'm going in with a navy blue and purple. The purple is kind of like I just basically combined a little bit of red, some brown, and blue. I'm going to go shade with a deeper blue. And as the paint dries, the colors kind of fade a little bit, but I do prefer like a vibrant coloring. I don't like it super muted, so I went in with a heavier purple there to shade near the ear. And then I'm going to go back in with that deep purplish brown color for the ears. So I'm going to just continue on with the shading. I'm starting with my darker areas. So here we're doing the trunk, going in also with that like deep purple color. You could even go with more like a navy or a brown here. I just want all of your darkest colors should kind of be consistent throughout this. So going back in here with that dark navy-ish brown color, and then in the ear corner, I'm going back with like that deep royal blue to shade, and this will kind of, as the painting dries and continues and blends together, it'll make a little bit more sense. Continuing with that dark blue around the top of the head, coloring in the eyes a little bit, which I'm going to go in with black later, but this is just to kind of get a little bit of structure as to where my shadiest spots are. We have like a vibrant blue here. And a lot of the trunk is shaded on the left side of it and in the center. So I'm going to keep that like bright blue kind of going throughout for my shaded areas. The darkest areas will probably be like a black gray, and the lighter areas are this brown color. So just take a light brown, go in not too heavy with your water. You want to just dip your brush into the water, kind of pat it dry, and then go in with your color. For more pigmented areas, you just go a little heavier with your paint and use a little less water. While you're laying it out, I think it's good to just kind of first throw down the water. When you're just kind of dyeing essentially in this case the ear one color, and we're going to go back in with details later as it dries. So now we're just touching those edges and letting it bleed up. I'm doing the edges with that dark blue like we did on the other ear. I'm just kind of moving it around, letting it bleed upwards. There's quite a bit of shading here, so it's okay if it spreads. Just make sure not to get the tusks wet because you want that to stay dry and stay light colored. So it's kind of dried now. I'm revisiting the painting at this point. Painting light tan for the body. There's hardly any dark shading on that right side of the body. So just a light tan is good. I added a little yellow because I wanted some like sunlight vibrancy in that corner of the ear. And just kind of throwing down a bunch of tan, which this color can be achieved through a dark umber mixed with a little bit of like a yellow and going on really lightly. You don't want too much pigment, and that's how you can get it to that light tan. Adding some shading, I want like a darker, deeper color. You can go browns or blues here. There's some shading in the legs. Kind of pulling it down near the feet and keeping those areas that you reserved to be light, either with no paint or very, very light paint. So now I'm shading the areas that with like a deep navy blue by mixing blue and brown and using that as kind of my darkest areas for now. I'm going to go in a little bit darker later, but now just coating the shady areas with a navy brownish blue. And again, that's a royal blue mixed with some sort of burnt umber or any kind of brown that you have to achieve that. Almost has like a purplish hue to it, and that like the heavier you go on the brown. But I'm mostly sticking with blue colors for this. So now we're just gonna add on some light gray, mixed that with some browns and a little bit of blue and yellow. And just go on with very light paint. You want it to just be very thin because it's not really shaded, but it's not really illuminated either. So we're going to go and we're going to shade the left and center part of the trunk with some darker gray brown. You can even do a little navy in there. I'll go back in with navy anyway, but adding again that same light gray color just all over the body. We don't want a lot of totally white areas. I'm adding a little bit of yellow on that ridge to the right side of the body. And there's this kind of rusty color on the tusks. And so I'm going in with like a reddish orange, and that's gonna, as it dries, fade a little bit, so it won't be such a bright red. But I do like more colorful shading than just, grays and browns, so yeah, a little mistake there. We're going to continue just adding some shading, little dark wrinkles for the ear creases. That's done with like a dark navy blue. You could probably even do some sort of like dark violet there as well. But in this case, I just used a navy blue. And it's kind of bleeding up. That's okay. You don't want it like super, super precise. It's just kind of a blended shadow. So I'm just going to continue to add some shading in the creases of the ear and the dent by the head right there near the eyes. Darkening some areas. This is all with a navy blue. The navy blue color is again created with a deep royal blue and brown. I'm not using any black yet. Sometimes black is just like a little harsh for watercolors, so I usually don't really do that till the end when I can see, okay, there's an area that needs to be darker than the navy. Shading, forehead. Got too much brown there, so. Shading in the corners. The forehead kind of juts out a little bit, so there's a little shadow on the ridge. I'm going in with kind of more of a royal blue. I'm blending. There's quite a bit in the real photo, quite a bit of blues just naturally coming through. It must have just been like the lighting that I took the photo in. And there's all these lines going up its forehead, so just kind of putting some loose structure of shadows of where the lines will go up. And the eyes are set back, so you don't want them to look like it's just two-dimensional, so making sure that those are a little deeper. They're set behind that little crease. And you want the tusks to be in the foreground and the side of the face shaded. So now you can see it's kind of dried a little bit. That the blue has kind of calmed down, and some of that shading that initially looked pretty dark, it mellows out quite a bit. So now I'm just going to go in while the rest of it's still drying, because you don't want it to get messy. You can do just some grass if you'd like. You can also just leave it blank and do your own thing there. I just decided that I wanted grass in this painting, but you can also just leave it as is. And you can do this color with some mustard yellow color, a little bit of green, just like a touch of it, a little bit of brown, and then go very thin with your paint, a lot of water, and just kind of lay it down. And then you can go back and add detail. Now once that's dried, I'm going to go back in and add some accents to the trunk. This I'm using black now. Very lightly going into the eyes. There's just a couple of creases in the trunk where I could use black. I'm just going to take that really lightly though. You want a very wet brush. Very lightly in the black paint, watercolor paint, kind of thin it out. Adding some ridges to the trunk. This I'm doing more with a dark brown. Moved on from the black. So now I'm just adding the gray color, tiny bit of black, just like a touch of it, a little bit of blue, mostly brown. I'm going on very thin with the paint. I'm just keeping it along the center of the trunk. And I'm just shading where the tusk kind of covers because the light is coming from the right. So the tusk kind of casts a little bit of a shadow on the trunk that you can now see. Just taking that gray, kind of going over the areas. I went on a little bit heavier. Just when you want something a little bit darker, you just add a little bit more of that paint. Less water. When you want something a little thinner, lighter, more water. You just want like an essence. I rather go on light and then add the depth as you go. This one I took a mustard yellow, mixed it with a bit of a brown. That back part. Now the leg, the front leg, it's kind of swinging. Front right leg, it's kind of swinging a little bit of it peeps behind the trunk. So I'm going to have to make a line a little more distinct and some shading so you can kind of see that it's a continuation of the front leg. Now I'm just taking that dark, this looks like a little bit of black mixed with blue. Or you can, if you want to just avoid the black because it can be messy, just brown and blue and go on with heavier paint, less water. And that'll create the darker shadows. Now we're just going in and doing a lot of the deep shading that we haven't gotten around to yet. Now I'm just adding a little bit of dimension with these creases. There's all these wrinkles in the elephant's face. I'm just kind of finding where they are by the tusk. It kind of arches into the trunk. So a little bit of dark there. Going in with that mustard yellow for the rest of the body. Ripples in the ear. There's a bunch of wrinkles at the start of the ear where it meets the head. It's quite dark. I want to go in there and find the little areas that need extra shadows. The nice thing about working with watercolors is if you make a mistake, just always have a paper towel ready. If you're a little too heavy-handed like I was here, and it just disappears it. I went in here with a brighter blue. Now I kind of want my colors to be a little darker and richer, that we're nearing the end of the painting. I'm usually more conservative in the beginning. I want to kind of lay everything out and see how it goes, and then I can start adding more depth and vibrancy to it. Shadow in the corner of the ear. This looks like I used black. Very little though. So here I'm taking some dark brown and I'm accenting little areas in the tusks. Just a couple little dots in the trunk and in the cheek. There was like a little bit of shading there. It's not super dark, but it's like a little bit lighter. The tip of the trunk is really dark because it's curled under and to the left, which is mostly shaded. So it's going to be pretty dark throughout. And then all the wrinkles in the trunk are just going to be obviously a little bit darker, and they get progressively lighter and less deep the higher you go on the elephant's face. So I kind of mixed throughout here using black for the wrinkle and dark brown. And I'm actually going to go at the end of the painting and highlight it a little bit with white, which is kind of tricky. Painting has to be very dry. Some people don't use white at all when they paint with watercolor. I don't do it a ton. I do kind of like the way it looks though. Yeah, going over with that like mustardy brown color, adding some browns. Doing some touch-ups. Now I'm taking that navy blue color and I'm with my small brush going through all these little details and adding wrinkles and lines throughout the body. I'm using a mix of blues for this, and then some areas that are a little lighter. I'm using a light brown that's made with a little bit of yellow and a little bit of brown. I'm just going on a slight, very not heavy on the touch. Adding a little bit of grass by the feet, some shading. So now I'm just going to add some more of those wrinkles by the head. I'm using a navy blue here and not a lot of water. It's going to be quite darker. And just not straight lines, but you want it to kind of be wavy in the shape of the ear. Adding a couple of wrinkles, a little off center, not just straight up and down. You want it a little bit diagonal. It's more of a natural fall of the ear. They have little like veins going through their ears and they're a bit thin towards the tips. So kind of add to that by having natural wavy lines. A little bit lighter. And we're adding some wrinkles also by the trunk, the tusks. The wrinkles are on the bottom of the tusks and they kind of pull up, but the top of the tusk is pretty light, so you want to keep that blank. And you're just creating some sort of like illusions of shading. Adding your lines in the tusk, or trunk, not tusk. So I want to go very dark on the trunk. So I'm adding this like deep brown all up the center of it. You just want to kind of like pull the brush in like a wavy form, not straight up and down. Just kind of move it around in a natural way. That goes a little bit wider at the width of the trunk, and goes a little bit more narrow when you get to some more of those little vein wavies into the ear on the left. As we already kind of did that. Now we're adding those same little lines and wrinkles like we did on the right side on the left. Here I'm using kind of like a dark brown, just adding some little wrinkles around the eyes and at the ears. A little bit of lining right there, kind of wavy because there's like a little ridge there. Not straight up and down. These wrinkles, they're kind of arched or they're waved, or there's not like a consistent pattern throughout. So there are these little wrinkles in the legs and they kind of go up at an angle. So we're going to create those wrinkles there with a dark brown or like a dark navy. You can even go in with black if you do it very lightly, and then we'll go back and highlight some of it. But that's why in the feet you want to make sure the highlighted areas are left kind of untouched, and then just follow the dark wrinkle right beneath where the highlight is. Now I'm just making sure that the end of the trunk is dark enough. I'm just adding some darkness. As stuff dries, you can kind of see like did it stay dark or did it kind of lighten up and doesn't look as dark as I want it to? So I'm going in with white, just pure white, no water, on small brush, and just adding these really light accents of white paint. You don't have to do this. I do this sometimes, and you only want to put it on when the paint is completely dry. So if your paper is damp at all, this won't work. It'll just bleed together. If you don't have a pure white, you just have like a very light blue or something like that, that still would kind of be natural. You could also go in with that. You don't want to do too much. It can kind of look a little crazy if you go too heavy with it. But it's just for these areas that maybe things kind of like bled in a little too much and you want like a little bit of a standout. So like this, I just adding very light touches of white on the trunk where there was these little pops of highlight that it just like adds to it. So I kind of splattered a little bit of blue and yellow, and that made me want to add some kind of splotchy trees in the back, just two of them. So I took some green, mixed it with a little bit of yellow and brown, and went on really lightly and just kind of speckled it around. Kind of want it to look like an acacia tree in the back. You don't have to do this stage either. You can also just maybe splatter some green, which is fun. You just dip your paintbrush in a lot of water and then put it in the green paint, whatever color you want. I'm going to do all across the board. I'm going to do blues and reds and purples and everything. That's just the style that I like to do my paintings in. But you also don't have to do any of this. You just have the elephant as is. You can add a tree, like a little bit of brown here, mixed with yellow to make a trunk. And this tree I'm doing a little bit farther in the distance. But you could do a baobab tree if you wanted. Depends on how much. I'm not a huge landscape person. I really like just portraits. And I'm just splattering some blues, some bright greens. Yellows are in there. reds. And kind of makes this like messy watercolor vibe. And now you can just add some details if you want. You can add a little bit more if you want to the grass, or you could just leave it. And so this is basically our finished product. Please let me know if you followed along and send me your pictures, if you painted with me, or if you were just here to watch. Also, thank you so much for coming along and painting with me.